Good afternoon. My name is Theresa Cruz. I am the director of the National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research at the Eunice Kennedy Shriver National Institute of Child Health and Human Development. I want to thank the organizers for inviting me to give some perspectives on telerehabilitation from NIH. I have no financial interest to disclose, and in the latter part of the presentation, I'll be presenting some opinions that are mine and do not necessarily represent those of NIH. For the agenda today, I'll give an overview of NIH, and I will talk about some specific funding opportunities for telerehabilitation research, and then I will talk some about research opportunities that I see in the field. So what is NIH? We are the National Institutes of Health. Our mission is to seek fundamental knowledge about the nature and behavior of living systems and to apply that knowledge to enhance health, lengthen life, and reduce illness and disability. We are the world's largest funder of biomedical research. Last year, our budget was about $41 billion. We are divided into 27 separate institutes and centers, many of whom support rehabilitation research, and I'll talk a little bit about that today. We also have the Office of the NIH Director. So NIH supports health research across the translational spectrum, from very basic research through translation, through clinical trials, into pragmatic studies and implementation research even. But the majority of our work is in the basic realm. So what NIH does do is fund research in academic institutions across the country and across the world, really. About 80% of our budget goes in the form of grants or contracts to academics like yourself who are doing research in your home institutions. About 10% of our budget goes to support research conducted on the NIH campus and in some labs across the country. We also do things like identify research gaps, fund training of new researchers, participate in workshops, either ones that we host ourselves or participate in ones like this. What NIH doesn't do is tell clinicians how to care for their patients. We don't regulate the practice of medicine or things like that. And we don't decide how much a treatment should cost. So we don't tell FDA what they should approve. We don't tell CMS how much they should reimburse for a particular intervention or drug, okay? But we provide the research for which they may help them make those determinations. So I work at the National Center for Medical Rehabilitation Research, and our mission is based on improving the health, productivity, independence, and quality of life for people with disabilities. And as I mentioned, we're located inside of NICHD. We were established in 1990 as the research component to the Americans with Disabilities Act. And I've listed our program priorities here, and you can see that there are several that relate to telerehab, including devices and technology, and rehab interventions. One of the things that NCMRR is tasked with is coordinating and collaborating across NIH and really across the whole federal government in the conduction of rehabilitation research. So we have a group that meets monthly that consists of about 21 institutes and centers that support rehabilitation research at NIH. So there are many other parts of NIH that you might want to apply to support your telerehab interventions. I've listed a few of them here: National Institutes of Neurological Disorders and Stroke, National Institute on Aging, Nursing Research, Biomedical Imaging and Bioengineering, diabetes, cancer, arthritis and musculoskeletal and skin diseases. So when you approach NIH, we may send you to another institute because of a better mission fit. And I'll be talking about mission fit and contacting NIH a little bit more. So in general, it has been a very good time to be doing rehab research at NIH. We've seen a steady increase in the last 5 years from a little over $500 million of research support to about $750 million in fiscal year 2019. So how do you apply to NIH? Well, the first thing you want to do is talk to a program officer, and I'll tell you how you can find that program officer in a moment. I've talked about how we have 27 different homes at NIH, different institutes and centers. That is one part of what you need to apply to NIH. The other thing you'll get when you apply to NIH is a study section, and that's the so-called jury of your peers, where your research project will be reviewed. An important thing to know is that the majority of NIH funding is reserved for what we call investigator-initiated applications. So you guys are in the field, you're doing the research, you know what the important questions are, and we try to leave the biggest chunk of money for people to come in with their own ideas to duke it out in peer review and have the highest scoring applications rise to the top. And I'm going to come back to this a few different times, but you don't need to wait for a specific call that addresses your research interests. Look for institutes that have mission relevant and apply through parent announcements. Funding decisions are largely driven by peer review, and I truly believe that you can do a lot to determine, how well you do in peer review. There's certainly some areas in the noise, but I think you can do a lot to put together a strong application. We have 3 due dates a year. So if your application isn't ready for February, that's fine. We'll take it in June. And if you need to wait till October, we're still here for that too. It does take quite a bit of time. It can be, 9 months or more from when you submit to when you get a funding decision. So you will get a score and it will may or may not be percentile depending on the type of funding mechanism you're applying for. And that impact score is based on 5 criteria, which I've listed here. For significance, we're looking at not just how important is the problem, not just how many people have had a stroke or a spinal cord injury or a brain injury, but what is the significance of the work that you are planning to do to advance the knowledge in that area. Investigator, how well qualified are you to be the principal investigator and to lead this study? We don't expect that the PI has all the expertise, but we do expect that you will have assembled a team that together is appropriate for addressing the questions you put forward. Innovation is in the eye of the beholder. Are you doing something truly novel? Are you adapting an existing intervention from one patient population to another? It is on you to define and to sell your innovation to the reviewers. Approach, how rigorous is your design? How well have you questioned your own outcomes? You should be the harshest critic of your hypothesis. And are you designing the strongest experiments to get at whether your hypothesis is correct? Your approach score generally matches most strongly with your overall impact score. So that is a very important part of your application. And then for the environment, do you have the support systems around you to get the research done? Do you have access to the patient population? Do you have letters of support, things like that? I've added a couple other bullets which aren't criterion scores, but they are embedded within these. So are you setting your hypothesis on a strong foundation? Are you presenting a rigorous and reproducible experiment? And then for clinical trials, there's a set of additional review criteria that have to do with the feasibility of those clinical trials. And I would highly advise you to look at the Center for Scientific Review website. they have the templates that reviewers will fill out as they are, critiquing your application. Make it easy for them. Know what they're looking for and make it easier for them to find it in your application. So after you've had that first submission, you've gotten your feedback and your summary statement, this is not necessarily the time that you should be retreating. Have it in your mind that you will probably need to resubmit and build that into your timeline and into your process. When you're looking at that summary statement, what are the questions you should be asking yourself? Did they really get the proposal? Were they interested? If it was discussed, that's probably a good sign that they were interested. What was a major concern versus what was a minor criticism? The summary statement should identify major, moderate, and minor weaknesses, but you might need to read between the lines a little bit. You might have to talk to your NIH program officer who's going to be listed on that cover page. Talk to your colleagues and mentors. It is a frustrating experience. I have had it myself, but please know that the reviewers genuinely want you to have a good project. They want you to be successful. So if they're taking the time to give you this feedback and give you these critiques, please take it with that goal and with that intent in mind. Don't feel rushed to come in with that resubmission. The reviewers will give you some very concrete and actionable suggestions many times. If it says that you don't have enough first author publications for that particular mechanism, then you need to get those first author publications. If you need more preliminary data, don't resubmit if you don't have that preliminary data. And then of course be collegial in your response. I've listed a few different types of funding mechanisms that we have. For more junior people, we have fellowships in pre-doctoral and postdoctoral varieties. Then we moved through our K awards, which can start with K99s who are still postdocs, through people who are early career, they've got tenure track positions. And then moving on to various types of R mechanisms, which is really where you should be going. The R01 is your ultimate goal. It's the bread and butter currency of NIH. I have put in a couple slides about clinical trials. I think at this point, most people know that NIH has a very specific definition of a clinical trial that is particularly broad. So please don't come in with the bias that you are or are not doing a clinical trial without checking your answers to these 4 questions, which is what will be asked in your application. And if you're doing telerehab, where you're assigning people interventions in their home and you're measuring the output on a health-related outcome, then you're probably doing a clinical trial. And I'm telling you this because this will determine what kind of funding opportunity you can apply to, and it will come with some reporting requirements through clinicaltrials.gov. So this is really an important question that you need to ask as soon as you've got that specific aims page and you've got those the protocols set up in your mind as you go to the next steps. I've mentioned a few times that it's really important to talk to your program officer, but I haven't told you how to find that person. This is our new and improved NIH reporter page. And what you can do here is go to this matchmaker, which I've circled over here on the bottom right. You can go to that link and you can put in your abstract, you can put in your specific aims, you could put in some high-level keywords about what type of research you're doing. And it will pull up similar funded projects. So this is only for our funded things. And it will say, which institutes are funding them, which study sections have reviewed those applications, and which program officers are associated with those funded grants already. So that will give you a really good idea of who you should be talking to at NIH. And you can follow up with them, something like an email with your specific aims. If you have an idea of which funding opportunities or which mechanisms you're targeting with those aims, include that in your email, and also include some suggested times when you might, when you're available to have a conversation. You should be doing this, 8 weeks before a due date, not 8 days before a due date. Workloads vary. Some program officers can respond same day. Some it takes a couple weeks. It is not an interpretation of their level of enthusiasm for your project, but know that workloads vary significantly across the ICs. So give yourself time to have that meaningful conversation. So we've talked a little bit about a term called funding opportunities. So I'll go into a little bit more detail about what those are. So a parent announcement is this general call for investigator-initiated applications. They are always out, you can always apply to them, and you want to be matching your research with a mission-relevant topic. There are things called program announcements with an R attached to it, a PAR. That R can take on a few different things. It could mean a different receipt date. It could mean a different review. These are largely being phased out in being replaced with something called a notice of special interest. And this is a billboard. This is a way of NIH advertising a particular scientific interest that we would like to receive applications in. And those notices will refer you to use a parent announcement. Again, these are areas of high priority for an institute. Then you may see something called a request for application. And that means it's a very targeted call. There's usually one due date that will be something like 30 to 60 days in, after it's been published. There will be a special review and there will be dedicated funds. That is usually how RFAs work. But again, you don't need to wait for that perfect funding opportunity announcement. Those parent announcements are available. So these are just some examples that I thought might be particularly relevant to this audience. We have a Mentored Research Scientist Development Award, our K series. Career development starts with a K at NIH. And we have a special opportunity for PTs and OTs who have PhDs to get that 5 years of mentored support. And towards the end of that, you would be expected to be submitting your R01s. We have an early career researcher R03. So this is $200,000 over 2 years. It is designed to help people collect preliminary data for a competitive R01. And then, our R01s, I mentioned those are, typically $250,000 to $500,000 direct costs a year for 4 or 5 years. I've also included our small business awards here. If you're working on a telerehab platform, it may very well be that commercialization of that will need to happen. But again, I've mentioned the idea of mission relevance. How do you find mission relevance? Every institute has a strategic plan. You can go and look through those strategic plans. There are areas of specific scientific topics that have their own research plans. Our websites list research priorities. So you can go around and find places at NIH that are relevant to your interests and then come in through parent announcements. I've listed a few examples here, and these slides will be available where telerehab is specifically called out. NCMRR has one out right now related to the needs of COVID-19, and we acknowledge that the role of telerehab in both treating people who have COVID as well as adaptations that have need to have been made to give people who need rehabilitation outside COVID through telerehab means. And then again, some other funding opportunities. that discuss either telemedicine or telehealth. In my last couple minutes, I did want to take a opportunity to talk about where I see the research in telerehab and where I think there are a lot of opportunities. Again, these are my opinions here. So the time is ripe. There's some expression about, you know, not letting a good crisis go to waste. And the COVID-19 pandemic has shown an incredible spotlight on the need for delivery of care in the home. I think people in rehab have seen this coming many years ago. We've seen a steady decline in you know, the length of stays in inpatient or outpatient hospitals as well. So we've known that the push for delivery of care in the community and in the home has been coming, but clearly this is a major disruption in how we think about rehab. And you know, I think that the demand for this type of work has never been you know, what it is at this point in time. I think we know a lot more about the behavioral aspects of delivering care in a remote setting. And I'll talk about this a little bit more, but you know, it's not just about developing the technology. I think, and I say this as an engineer, I think we might have focused a little bit too much on the technology of delivering rehab in the home and not enough on, you know, the behavior and the science of behavior change to keep people motivated, to keep people engaged. And we have a real opportunity to take some of the lessons from our behavioral and social science colleagues and apply that to rehab. And then of course with technology, you know, the availability of broadband and the availability of sensors and really the acceptance of them in the home. How many people have smart home devices or you know, devices on their body right now that it is not, you know, outside the realm of expectation that you would have sensors. I would point out that there are huge disparities in this, and I think there are real needs to address inequity particularly in the technology range. That just because these devices are available, that doesn't mean that everyone has the same accessibility to them. So I would caution some there. You know, as far as, you know, what research questions are there, I've just been them in what makes sense in my brain. I think about the who, starting with the consumers, starting with the people who need the rehab and will be receiving the rehab and doing the rehab. You know, make sure that we're taking their needs and their interests into account, as long as they're along with their care partners. This should not be a top-down paternalistic approach. Recognizing that there's going to be a lot of variability here. What works in an urban environment may not work in a rural environment. People who receive rehab span the lifespan, right? We've got, you know, what works for young children may not necessarily work for older adults. We've already talked about issues of access and health disparities. You know, what care are we delivering? I don't think we have a clear consensus on what's the best fit for any patient in the clinic, let alone in their home. So are we focusing on things like strength and balance and flexibility? Are we doing motor control? Are these delivery regimes giving the same level of intensity or duration that we would see in a clinic? And then there's quite a bit of technology that comes with this. I think we're going to be seeing more non-invasive brain stimulation done at home. I think we're going to be seeing more haptics, more virtual and augmented reality, which leads me to my last bin, which is, the how. What kind of safety do we need to put around these care delivery? What are these supervised or are they unsupervised? Is there some kind of hybrid where people are doing rehab at home and occasionally coming into the clinic? Do we need new outcome measures for these at-home delivered care? Can we adapt what we have to do assessments virtually? And then, of course, how are we making sure people have equipment to do this work? I just want to end with a success story. So this is Flint Rehab. It's a company, a small business that has received several grants from NCMRR and from NIH to develop technologies in a consumer price point where people can purchase these and do these trainings and continue their rehab at home. So I do think we have some examples that we can pull from, but these are not the broad range that we would like at this point. And with that, I will switch to a live view and take questions. Thank you so much.